I was talking to the guy on the ferry, and he said something odd.
What was that?
He said bad things happen here.
This town has its secrets, but there's something rotten here.
The only thing that's going to get people killed here is a lack of infrastructure.
Well, that's because the island has lain dormant, but she's waking up. And that's when bad things happen. You think the fog out there is natural? No, it ain't natural. It's a haunt.
I was tricked by a devil and betrayed by my lessers. We couldn't even find vermin to sate our hunger. Some ate the corpses, others gorged on dirt. I was contemplating how to end my own life with my own hand when I saw it. But I was starving, and it was starving too. Covenant was offered for my settlement's salvation, and I signed that pact with my own blood.
What was it you saw?
A demon? The island itself?
You can't let people stay here. That's the end. The end is not right.
I thanked God that something else came to me. Fulfill the pact, and the flames will stop. If I had refused, none of you would be here.
Maybe that would have been better.
Welcome to Widow's Bay. There's so much to see here.
The longer I sit with it, the more I feel like Widow's Bay might be one of my all-time favorite series. And Apple has already been open about greenlighting future seasons of the show, and have even been talks about potential spin-offs. And while in my personal opinion they should hold off on really expanding the show until the original series finds its footing, there is a lot of narrative potential within this series. And with interviews with Katie DePold only building my confidence in the show's narrative potential.
I mean, in some ways, season 1 feels like a prequel to life on this island, you know?
Right, because we've set up so much now that you're kind of ready to go.
I figured it's time we covered what some of the show's future seasons could look like. In the beginning of the series, the church bell rings 9 times, confusing Reverend Bryce as they shouldn't be ringing at all. Turns out, the bell tolls for how many sacrifices it wants. It did want 9, but with Kenny's sacrifice towards the end of the season, they now only need 8 more, hence resulting in the church bell ringing 8 times at the end of the series. So we'll definitely see a lot of struggle into deciding if they should sacrifice anyone, and then if so, who those sacrifices should be. And I'm assuming they won't get them all at once. And it's a good thing the show presented itself as sort of a semi-monster of the week. This leaves a lot of wiggle room for some really interesting one-off stories they could establish. We could have more stories involving the hotel, whether that be its history or with newer residents taking residence. You could even have an entire episode focusing on the hotel manager himself struggling to keep things together. We could have the Hag return and either watch them haunt Tom or other characters, or we could explore more of the seas of Widow's Bay and see what exactly lurks beneath them besides the Hag. We know according to Wick's story, the waters hold something that is oddly resemblant to a kraken. If Apple provides the show a bigger budget, I would love to see some deep sea abominations. We could have stories focused on Patricia's enemies in both the Boogeyman and Chris, or maybe even have them working together, which I highlighted in one of my theory videos recently. To bullet point, I think Chris could have been the Boogeyman's partner in his original killing spree. But it's not just Chris that has a lot of narrative potential, as a lot of the town residents are super quirky in their own different roles. We could see some characters have relatives, or more interactions between different characters who don't talk much. I personally would like to see more about Ruth and why her calendar said call Francis every Wednesday at 8:30. Francis just so happening to be the name of the direct descendant of Richard Warren. You could explore more of Widow's Bay history through flashbacks or bottle episodes, as the island has quite a rich history of incidents and weird events, which I actually made a video based on Widow's Bay's entire history and its major events that's up on the channel right now. I'd personally like to see more of the Coven and the narrative potential involving that, and maybe some lingering or still existing Coven members that are still around today, which I also have a video going further into detail on. We could even have an episode or segment focused on the old mental asylum and maybe what Tom's wife went through. Though depending on how they do it, it could be awfully derivative of what they're establishing in Welcome to Derry. As in that show's next season, we should actually be covering Periwinkle while she's working there, which I also made a video on. You could have a flashback episode sort of explaining how the boogeyman came to be and who he exactly was. His abilities were very, very similar to that of Richard Warren. He could endure a lot of damage and seemed like an unstoppable force. This potentially alluding to the fact that they could have also made a pact with the same entity Richard Warren did. Only, unlike Richard Warren and having a family, they actually ended up isolating themselves, becoming a hermit. We could learn more about Ruth's old flame, Alfred I believe his name was, who was bit by an animal and became said animal. Doesn't seem like that's a frequent occurrence on the island, but it also doesn't seem like anyone's too surprised about it either. We could learn more about Ruth's family, especially her dad, or those who sunk themselves in a submarine. But when things do get intense on the island, we know they have procedures in place to actually go into shelters and stay safe somehow, even though their provisions are not up to date and they don't really have much supply. But if you notice, the shelter itself has a number 3, so you have to wonder what happened to the original 2 shelters they had. Or what members of the island even established these things in the first place, as within Shelter 3, we do see the entire video tutorial on what to do with the sacrifices. This show has single-handedly set up 3 different witch hunts, both with the actual witches who used to exist and could still be lingering. My money's on Patricia somehow being a descendant of such. Those hunting for 8 sacrifices to deliver to the entity and calm things down on the island, and trying to figure out who on the island knows more than they let on. My money's on Jerry, very suspicious. Very likely that the church at some point had heavily got involved and helped establish some of these protocols, but it's hard to say what members of the community could still know about the island's deeper secrets. Wick to me is someone who's also still suspicious, with his story oddly resemblant of Willie the Clown's in how he described,
Gotta be careful. They'll drag you down with them if you let them. Let them all rot in hell.
very much reminding me of Wick's story and almost being dragged under himself. There's also a popular theory I've seen online that Wick could have been the previous mayor at some point, but crumbled under the pressure. Or maybe was just a little bit too paranoid for people's liking. Now that we know things are only going to heat up on the island, and that the islanders will likely want to sacrifice tourists over any of themselves, it would be cool to see more of the tourists not only encounter some of these horrific events and provide a more realistic reaction to such, but also seeing the tourists' desperation in deciding to leave the island themselves. I personally have been saying that I would love for a large group of tourists to actually get trapped on the island for some supernatural or paranormal reasons, just like the original island inhabitants, forcing things to get crazier as the 2 groups of people try to learn to coexist, especially considering the differences in their way of life compared to islanders. It's always going to be jarring to go from a lifestyle more focused on the city to living on an island that's definitely more rural. And it will also be interesting to see who everyone goes to in regards to making decisions around there. And that of course will likely fall into Tom's shoulders. Seeing his character struggle between choosing sides makes perfect sense considering the duality of his place on the island. He wasn't necessarily born there, and he did live a good portion of his life on the mainland. Though he does have enough experiences there to resonate with the islanders, but he also has enough to resonate with the tourists. Should any feud start or lines get drawn, I'm excited to see what he'd want to decide. As it doesn't really matter which side he chooses, if anyone finds out that Evan is the actual last descendant that needs to die, outside of maybe Ruth, I don't think anyone will necessarily be taking Tom's side at the end of the day. One of the primary people he has to worry about, of course, is Bashir, and I'm excited to see the conflict between these two in future seasons. The more I thought about these two, the more I realized they were the complete inverse of each other. Both desperate to protect their kids, and both hating the island, but we also know Tom is a little more OCD and wound up. Bashir, from what we've seen, is far more laid back. But we also see where Tom's morals are slightly flexible and shifting frequently, not necessarily making the most noble of decisions throughout the show, but in the end struggling to decide in the trolley problem he found himself in. Versus Bashir, as soon as finding out the context he needs to, is steadfast on what he needs to do, leaving absolutely no room for reconsideration when he eventually finds Ruth.
No! Oh, damn, my child.
Which only leaves you to wonder what he'll actually do if he finds out Evan is the real last descendant. That assuming Ruth dies at some point. Which honestly, she's kind of a tank. She ran up those stairs faster than I would, and she even took a bullet pretty well. Though cutting back to Tom, just because he's slightly a coward now, doesn't mean his rise to power won't change his character just a bit. As with any great show, you should have the characters slowly evolve. We saw with the first Island Protector in Richard Warren that even in the end, he still possessed a solid bit of humanity and especially fear.
Oh, please! Oh, please! You kill them all! You kill them all!
This could allude to us to the fact that Richard Warren's more dark nature is because of his prolonged exposure to the pact he had with the entity. I would love to see Tom be forced to make a pact as well and slowly descend towards the same corruption. Tom's turn to the dark could definitely take its time as well. You could save his full turn to the dark side or his final Richard Warren looking stage for the ending of the series if it's translating well to screen. Either way, I just really love how the first season not only provided enough for a solid one-season story if the show didn't do too well. Should the writers choose to embrace its own lore rather than purely focusing on new stories, they'll have to keep finding the perfect balance of both comedy and horror, which season 1 did perfectly in my opinion. And even though Apple's really excited about the success of the show and its many Emmy nominations, I hope they take their time to really let the show solidify itself as a series before they attempt to make a bunch of spin-offs or oversaturate it in any way. Unless the spin-offs they're talking about are maybe 1-hour specials or mini movies focused on certain stories or events that happened, they need to let the show get to at least its 3rd season before starting a whole nother multi-season project. As of this moment, despite how much I loved its blend, there were quite a few people I talked to who weren't a fan of the comedy in season 1, as it just didn't sit well with them. So if the creators of Widow's Bay can prove they can consistently provide this blend with each new installment or season, then I'd say let's definitely look into making some spin-offs to covering the rich lore of this island. But if you disagree with anything I said, I guess feel free to. I don't know, I just make YouTube videos.
Welcome to Widow's Bay. There's so much to see here. Come with me. I'll show you around. There is something about these seafaring towns of superstitions. Their tall tales,